Mi gente, hello and welcome to Kica's Corner. My name is Kica Matos and I am your host. On this show, we look at our community, our city, and the world, all of it through a social justice lens. Today, we're going to talk about millennials and social justice. Just who are millennials? They're the generation born between 1981 and 1996. So they include young people between the ages of 23 and 38. Among the three key defining things that have shaped the lives of millennials are the September 11 terrorist attacks, social media, and the explosion of the internet, and the Great Recession of 2008. Let me share some interesting data about millennials. They're better educated than the previous generations, and more women have graduated with college degrees than men. They are the second largest population of those eligible to vote, and in fact, they were one of the groups that set a record for voter turnout in the midterm elections of 2018. Less flattering portraits of millennials include references to them as the me generation. In fact, Time magazine once had a cover story that referred to millennials as the me generation. Others refer to them as the Peter Pan generation because millennials are more likely to live at home with their parents, less likely to marry, and seem less interested in having kids. Still, millennials are known as an upbeat generation that remains optimistic about the future. They're more open to change than older generations. They're the most likely of any generation to identify as liberals, and they're also more supportive of progressive issues than other generations. In the studio with me today are two badass millennials, Mayra Melendez and Mercy Loyo. Both of them are millennials. They're both women of color. They're both steeped in the social justice community, and that is, in fact, how I have come to know them. So welcome, Mercy and Mayra.
Hi.
First, talk to me a little bit about yourselves. Where did you grow up? And let's start with Mercy.
Where did I grow up? Home is such a weird concept, but I was born in Uganda. My family and I moved to the U.S. when I was 8. We settled in Ohio, and I moved from Columbus to Delaware, Ohio. It's where I spent most of my years growing up. Yeah.
And where do you live now?
I live in New York, Brooklyn, Crown Heights.
Why New York?
We were just talking about this on the way here. I think New York has this energy that nowhere else in the world has. And I think that if you have the chance, spend at least a year in New York, because there's so much there and you can do so much, and you can define yourself and redefine yourself in a way that you can't anywhere else. Yeah.
And are you in your 20s or your 30s?
I'm in my 20s, early 20s. Yeah.
Did you vote in the last elections?
I did.
Okay.
I did, yeah.
Myra, what about you?
So I was born in Lima, Peru, and I came to the U.S. with my family when I was 7 years old. And we first lived in like BC, Maryland, for a few months, and then we moved to Salisbury, Maryland, which is in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So it's like a peninsula, very like rural area next to the beaches. And I basically grew up there my whole life, and then until I came to New York at 22 for work.
Okay. And what is your impression of New York?
I mean, it's been like so first I lived in Westchester, New York, in Yonkers, which is obviously very different than the city, but living in Yonkers, New York kind of allowed me to get to know the community a little bit more, like on a personal level, just because in New York City, like there's so much going on, there's so many people, but living in Yonkers helped me be more intimate and get to know that part of New York, which I feel like not that many people who live in the city get to know. And then I moved now to Queens, which I love. I absolutely love it. Growing up in a predominantly like white area where there weren't really that many other people like me around, it's just been so great to walk down the street and find like a Peruvian restaurant like right around the corner, just something that I never had like growing up. So it's been really great so far.
When you think about the issues that have affected both of your lives from a global perspective, what would you say they are? I earlier mentioned 9/11, and I mentioned social media. What are those issues for you? And I mentioned the recession as well. Would you agree with those, or would you add some more?
I guess I'll start answering this. I think because I didn't grow up in this country when 9/11 happened, I also had to relearn that when I came to the US. But something that I think for millennials, especially millennials of color, or just millennials and Gen Zs of color, something that really shaped them was the election of Obama. And that was a very powerful moment. And yes, my politics and Obama's politics aren't quite the same, but the symbol of what that meant and what I could do was something that really transformed me when I was younger.
Take us back to that day of the elections.
I was in 7th grade. I know I stayed
So you were
up.
13 at the time?
I was 12.
Okay.
I stayed up to watch it happen, and my parents, they weren't home, but me and my siblings were sitting in the living room, and I was like, black man is gonna be in the White House, and his black wife, there's gonna be a black family in the highest office in this world. And to know that there was someone there that I shared something with just meant the world to me. Yeah.
What about you, Mayra?
Yeah, so I usually talking about 9/11. So I came to the U.S. in 2001, January 24th, 2001.
Wow.
And I remember, so our first year here, I remember being in 3rd grade and that happening. So that was our very first big, the thing that I most remember from that first year of like living here, just seeing that happen, and like the confusion, and like my family back in Peru being like really scared and being like, why did you guys move? Like, come back. Like, it's not, like it's not going well. So I think it did have kind of that was like the first impression, just because that was like the first like thing that I saw in the first year here. And things drastically changed after, right? Our immigration, like we immigrated right before, and immigration laws drastically like changed after 9/11, just how people, people entered and everything. Actually when Obama was elected, so I remember like also being like young. I think I was in maybe like, I don't know if you were.
I was 11, 12.
So I was probably like 14.
Yeah.
Because I think we're 10 years apart. And I remember like my parents were already going through some like immigration struggles, but I remember just like seeing him elected and just being like, oh my God, guys, like everything's gonna change now.
Right.
Like we're good now. Like, he's gonna bring change, and like everything's gonna be happy, and like, everything's gonna be fine. But just having like that kind of like hope again, like when the elections first happened.
You're listening to Kica's Corner on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We are streaming live on TuneIn Radio and newhavenindependent.org. We're also streaming live video on Facebook Live. Just go to facebook.com/New Haven Independent, or just go to your Facebook page and look us up. So both of you are millennials who have chosen to dedicate your lives up until now to social justice issues, and both of you are doing advocacy on immigration. Why social justice and why immigration?
$1 million question. I think for me, especially being a black woman, there's a sense of responsibility to those who look like you, and to do better, to leave the world better for them. And Viola Davis tells this story of when she was in college at Juilliard, she left and went to the Gambia. There was this group of Madinka women who, to have a child in that culture is like a very big thing. But they were having this ceremony for the infertile women, and all these women were making noise, and they were chanting something along the lines of, God may not have seen you, but I'm going to do what I can in my life to make as much noise so that he, she, they can hear you. So that's what has informed my decision to do this work. And I remember when the March of Our Lives happened, Naomi Wadler, who's the 11-year-old girl, speaking up there for black women and being like, there's something in all of us. I don't know if it's just like for people of color where you feel a sense of responsibility to do that. And that's why I do this.
What about you, Mayra?
So I came into this, I've always, when I was 18, due to personal like issues in family with immigration and to wanting to go to college and wanting to continue, it kind of just like to survive really, I turned into student organizing. It was just me and my friend back in Maryland, and it was a very rural region where like, there was like no other organizing or no other thing around. Everything was very hush hush. So we turned into student organizing and connected with organizations in like DC, Maryland, just to get things like access to education. So in a way it kind of came out of like a thing for like survival, like just like you have to do this because it's your immediate need. And I think out of that it now it just continued on to where I am now. But it kind of came in, my family didn't come from, I'm from all my other families in Peru, so I so like my only immediate family I have is my parents, my mom and my dad, and but they didn't, they didn't come from a social justice background. They came from like, a different background. So it just kind of was just like something that I had to do to reach. And I'm very thankful for all the people that took their time to come down and speak to us, in the middle of nowhere, Maryland, and teach us how to organize and stuff, and gave us their ear and gave us their attention. But yeah, that's how it turned out to be. And this is where I am now. It's been a very long journey, but still here and still keeping that in mind and trying to fight for that every day.
Beautiful. I earlier shared some of the general descriptions about millennials. On the negative side, people say that millennials are narcissistic, individualistic people, or a generation that has those attributes. But on the plus side, people say that it's a generation that is optimistic, that's civically engaged, and is very progressive. Do you agree with these characterizations? And I know there are always problems with generalizations, but I want to hear directly from millennials. How do you feel when people say these things about millennials?
I want to disclaim that I don't speak
for all millennials. Yeah.
But I also think that what is being said of millennials is not any different from what people said from previous generations. It's just that we live in an age where you can't escape these things through like social media and a constant news cycle, but we are a generation of many contradictions, and I think that can also be a very good thing. Like, we are very hopeful, but look at what we have to like exist in. So.
I agree. We're actually just having this conversation before. I also want to put the disclaimer, like, like I think I'm my own kind of millennial, and I think that both of us have maybe had different upbringings and the traditional, like, as someone who like grew up in the U.S., like, then we both come from immigrant families and everything. So I think that makes our experience like a little different, our upbringing. But I do have to say that, my parents always say the same thing to me. They're like, oh, like, you guys don't have, like, the same values of marriage, like, kids, family. I'm just like, oh, my God, Mom, it's just because we're just able to see things a little differently than how you were, like, in the past, I do think, now the social media thing, I agree. I don't think you can escape. I think it's, it's created itself to its own, its own thing. And I think it's inescapable. I think we were just the generation that just fell on this new rise of like the technology and everything, that it just like it's us that to like go through it.
Are you both big users of social media?
No, that's why we're not good to speak for millennials. Okay. No.
Yeah, I would say I think like the older that I get, I want to keep a little bit more boundaries between. I mean, I love it when people, I follow so many people, but I feel like I use social media more to just like get stuff than share.
Okay. Yeah. That's pretty unusual based on the characterizations of millennials.
I also think that like we have to be mindful of what group of millennials is the most visible, because oftentimes when they talk about millennials and who gets to own that and what that means, it's typically not Black and brown women or Black and brown women who didn't come from upper middle class backgrounds. Yeah,
I agree 100%.
That's a really important nuance. Yours is a generation that is and will be dealing with really serious issues like a dying planet, huge student debt, and a democracy that's being tested each and every day in ways that our democracy hasn't been tested in a long time. and pile onto that a deeply racist president who has created deep racial divisions in this country. That's a lot to inherit for a generation. What do you
Yeah.
think is the way forward?
Oh God.
I had to pause.
I know this is a dissertation topic in and of
Yeah.
itself,
But
but
it feels
I'm
like-
curious to know. That's a lot of responsibility and a lot of weight, especially the dying planet, right?
Yeah.
We don't get to hop onto another planet, right? These
Yeah.
are serious issues.
I think before I even answer that, I have to go back to I read a lot, mostly because when you don't have a lot of people of color around you growing up as I did, you go to books.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite authors is Upile Shisala. She's a Malawian author. And she has this quote, and I use it as a mantra somehow, of like at the center.
Can I stop you there? Can you spell the name of this author?
Upile Chisala, Upile,
Okay.
and then Chisala is Chisa.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
And so she has this passage that, and my takeaway from it is that at the center of your healing or your revolution or change is always you. And I think so often, even before like millennials and all that stuff, people were used to look at institutions for change. And I think the unique thing about millennials and those coming after us is that we're for once just reckoning with the fact that like we ourselves have that power and we don't need to look to someone else to give us permission to make that change. And I don't know if that even answers your question, but the first place that I would start is when looking at the way forward is to look at myself
Mhm.
and be like, the change lies within me and doing what I like to bring about some sort of change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think there's sometimes where I get really down
Yeah.
about where we are right now. I get really down about what are the next steps.
Yeah.
You know, you start thinking about like the future too, right? So I just turned 26. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm almost near 30. I need to like start, things that I felt like I didn't think about in my early 20s, but
Mhm.
now it's like I gotta think about like to find something really stable. Like I'm really at this stage where I'm like just what I value the most right now is like just like family, making sure they're okay, like stability, building things, like making sure that like future generations have
Mhm.
like stability and like building the, like generational wealth, just something that like our families didn't have and
Yeah.
that we're just having to create now in this new country because we
Right.
don't have like our other relatives here. They're all back in Peru, so me and my partner were just thinking because he's right now he didn't go even things like going like whether going to college is worth it not because there's people that just like are able to get really nice paying jobs and stability without even so we have all these questions, but I think for me like even though I can get really like down sometimes, like in the end, like when it all like just gets through, it's just like you have to do what you always do, just like push through it and like try like keep like hope
Mhm.
alive and
Yeah.
try to like keep going like because there's nothing else that I can do. I can just like sit down and be like about it, but like if I don't do anything then yeah.
So most of your formative years for both of you were spent under two radically different
Mhm.
administrations in the United States. You talked about Obama and feeling a sense of empowerment and hope and possibility. And then we now have a president who is almost exactly the opposite of Obama, filled with racial hatred, really defining an agenda based on the backs of immigrants, right? Having a deeply xenophobic agenda, not believing in climate change. How do you make sense of the difference between the two presidents? And do you still believe in our democracy?
I still think that to live in a place where you can have both Obama and Trump is also a very American thing. To have this black man who was perfect in every single way be followed by a white man. That's such an American thing. Just like to have a person of color ascend to the highest office and that be undone by whiteness.
Mhm.
I think that can only happen in America and given its racial history. But in terms of making sense of it and making sense of what I do in terms of it. I think I don't have a clear answer, but I often just go back to my own joy. And my own joy can be an act of resistance, and people discount. I've had like white people, white like women tell me, how can you be so happy? And I'm like, you don't know the power of Black joy in spite of everything else. So yeah, just like claim your joy and don't have your emotions attached to whatever else is going on. Yeah.
Right, it's the only thing that's left.
Yeah,
Really, right? Like if I don't
That's so
find,
profound.
yeah, like if I don't find a sense of like happiness or
Right.
joy like outside in my personal life, then like if I just
Yeah.
like focus myself on this and like
Yeah.
like I'm really
Right.
gonna just like let it like
Yeah.
overcome me completely. I do the same thing. I think one key difference for me is that I think I took things for granted under Obama. I mean,
How so?
I think one of the biggest thing is like DACA. I think I could have had the possibility to like travel abroad, but I kept on pushing it back because I was just like, oh, like, everything's going to be, I also went through after, the 26 elections. I didn't really follow them just because I was just in this space that I don't want to hear anything about politics or anything
Yeah.
at all. So I think when the election happened, it was just kind of like, okay, I have to think about what's going to happen next. If this gets taken out, what to do. And not that we didn't fight. I mean, I think under the Obama administration, we put so much pressure, and it was because of undocumented youth power that we got DACA. And I remember going to the detention center during the Obama administration too, and like seeing people detained like in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and being like, no one knows that this is happening. And this is happening under this administration, and it had the most deportations. So we were still, we were still fighting under the Trump administration. So I think that stays the same. There is a sense of more like it's everywhere now, right? And it's more rapid in the terms of like the policies that are being changed and everything. But I think in the end, like the battle is still the same, right? As it was, yeah.
You're listening to Kica's Corner on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven and streaming live on newhavenindependent.org. We're also streaming live on Facebook Live. So go to the Facebook page and look us up. I want to talk a little bit about race, and we've touched on it some. About 40% of millennials are people of color. And when you poll them on some of the issues of our time, and this is beyond people of color, so polling millennials writ large, 75% of all millennials say that immigrants strengthen the country. Most believe that we are responsible for climate change, and only 29% approve of Donald Trump. Yet, when it comes to race, it appears that white millennials have the same racial biases as the older generations. And by way of example, an estimated 46% of white millennials surveyed said that discrimination against white people is just as big a problem as discrimination against people of color. One political science professor put it this way. She said, quote, "Racial resentment is remarkably consistent among the white population over time." What is your own experience of race and racism amongst millennials?
It's a whole, okay, let me see if I can condense this. I think even as an immigrant of color, I was always aware of my blackness, but I wasn't aware of my blackness in relation to whiteness until I got to this country. And whiteness is such a lethal force. But my experience with race with other millennials is that as much as we like to talk about how like millennials are so progressive, we can't forget that like they are still white millennials, and that so many of these attitudes aren't like racist attitudes don't just stop with a generation. We all still exist within a racist society, and we haven't figured out a way to address that in a concrete way. So of course I'm not shocked that like racism does exist even among white millennials. Yeah.
I agree. I think another thing that I feel like New York City, living it can be like a bubble.
Yeah.
Where everything, it feels like, oh, everyone's progressive, la la la. But as soon as you leave, like I grew up in rural
Mhm.
Maryland, and I went to a predominantly white institution where I was a political science major for a bit until I dropped it because I couldn't do it anymore. My classes were filled with very far right white male students that I would just get into heated arguments about immigration, race, and things like that. And so I just always knew that, like because I saw it firsthand, like
Yeah.
just how like bad it could be from people my own age. So I think I was always, conscious of that it doesn't change. Moving to New York City doesn't just feel like a bubble because it feels like this. But I'm like, no, as soon as you leave or anywhere, or like even in New York City itself, but like I agree. I don't think it's something that
Yeah.
goes
What's
away.
the answer? I mean, how do we start meaningfully moving towards an eradication of white supremacy in this country?
I think for so long the burden has been placed on people of color to, one, prove that white supremacy affects their lives, and two, educate white people. The way that I see it is that the white people who call themselves allies, which they really shouldn't, the ones who say that I see race as a problem, that conversation needs to be had amongst white people before they can come in and they can work with communities of color to eradicate white supremacy. And I don't think, oftentimes when that's been suggested, the pushback that I've gotten, it's like, well, that's segregation. No, it isn't, because I can't have a conversation about white supremacy with you being there and centering your whiteness in it. White people need to have that on their own. Yeah.
What do you think, Myra?
I don't know this answer to the question, but I think we're just like long overdue. I mean, if
Right.
you look at immigration just now, I feel
Mhm.
like race is now becoming an issue that we're talking about when it's like, this isn't just an issue now.
Right. Immigration has always had a racial
The
component
history of
to it.
immigration
Right.
is the history of racism
Right.
in
Right.
America.
But to me, it's just outstanding that just now we're just beginning it's becoming more popular or more like to like talk about,
Right.
right? With this new wave of like social justice being trendy now and
Mhm.
everyone trying to like get on the bandwagon is
Right.
what it feels like. But I think that just like, that's one of the things that I always like look to that astounds me. I don't, honestly, I'm very tired. I'm very tired. I feel like I've been doing this since I was 18 years old, and I mean, it never gets easier. If anything, I feel more tired now. I feel like I had all this energy when I was like 18 to 21, and now I'm just like, I don't want to explain anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
Like, go read a book. Google. Like, you
Yeah.
have resources. So I do think that there's amazing work being done by people. I think that the people that are doing amazing work don't get amplified or they don't get the attention. And if we could change that, that could also be. I also, sorry, I'm going a little long. I remember there was this talk by Brene Brown, who's this like
Oh,
vulnerability.
yes.
Did you see
Yeah.
that?
Mhm.
Yeah, and it was just
So for the
Hey.
audience, tell us who Renee Brown is.
Brene Brown is this. I think she's like a
She's-
researcher. Or
She's a
academic-
psychologist, researcher, and she also does these talks that she will drag you and comfort you at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
She will tell you how you need to be, she'll talk to you about vulnerability and how that needs to be a thing that all of us approach more and not just like put it at a distance. Yeah.
Right, and I saw her talk on race. I think she
Mhm.
had one at Riverside Church,
Uh-huh.
and it was just like great. It talked a lot about how, for to talk about race, where people need to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
They need to admit that they're not, that they don't know. Because I feel like a lot of the things come from people not wanting to admit that they don't
Yeah.
know or that they're
Right.
wrong, and they try to like, and that just does more harm. It's like it's okay to just like be, like,
Fronting.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. I wish I had a notebook full of like notes because that talk was just amazing. But I do feel like a lot of it comes from like inner work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Brene Brown is a white woman for
Yeah.
all of you who maybe will be more likely to listen to her. So, yeah.
So unfortunately, we are coming to the end of the show. And
Mhm.
as my practice is with my guests, it's time to get personal. Are you
Ooh,
ready?
Okay.
I'm here.
All right. So again, we'll start with Mercy and then we'll go to Myra. Who is your shiro or hero?
The many women within me, like through my family, I feel that, I know this is like really weird, but like I feel them guiding me, and all the women of color who emote and create and just, yeah, those are my heroes.
I would say the same. I think I get constant inspiration from my friends who are in similar situations like me and who
Yeah.
every single day are like, I got this, I got to do this. I'm just
Right.
like, wow, like, yeah, I see you thriving like, in the
Right.
middle of all of this. And I think that's just constant inspiration. I think it's hard for me to like pinpoint one person.
Yeah.
I love Janet Mock, but like, I also don't want to
Always.
like, super idealize her. So I
Right.
think I try to just get like daily
those
inspirations
around
from
you.
those
Yeah.
around you. Yeah.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Teleporting, so I don't have to take the subway.
When I was younger, I would have said speed read. Love to read. But right now, I just want to be able, because I have to cook, just like look at a dish and know how. That's what I don't know if that's a superpower, but like, yeah.
And finally, if you could do one thing to change the world, what would it be?
It's a really big one.
Feed and clothe and nurture all the children. Because I think so many adults are just broken children walking in adult bodies. And yeah, that's what I would do.
I think a big issue that I keep thinking about daily is climate change and how much it's going to affect us
How
in
did
the
I
next
forget the
few
climate?
years. And like how it's going to
Yeah.
affect, immigration and everything. If I could make everyone care
Yeah.
a little more,
Right.
just so
Right.
we can have a living planet.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big things that's been in my head lately. Just make everyone care a little more, like plant a tree. Make everyone in the world plant a tree one day.
Right, because the Amazon has been burning for
Right,
3
exactly.
weeks.
You've seen it, yeah, in the news.
Yeah.
That'll be mine.
So, folks, unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you for listening to Kica's Corner, and Mercy and Mayra, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Until next time, here is wishing more justice in the world and many, many days of sunshine.
just might be the best deal in this crooked old town. Ferry boat man, take you up the slip, and the undertaker lay your body down. Politicians, aristocrats, they used to walk above me, now we're sleeping side by side. You could pay for privilege, but you could pay for pride. But there's some things in this world you cannot buy. Cavalry, cavalry, take me in and shelter me. My immortal home you'll be, oh cavalry, my home. Cavalry, oh cavalry, open up your gates to me. You can have my body, but my soul flies free, oh cavalry, my home. Up on the mountain, so lone and gray, a stranger in a strange land, never done nobody wrong. The sun goes black, the earth does shake. Hold your tears when I am dead and gone. This sour wine you offer me, it takes away my pain and it makes my body numb. Between two thieves, a head hanging low, forgive them for they know not what they've done. Cavalry, oh cavalry, take me in and shelter me. My immortal home you'll be, oh cavalry, my home. Cavalry, cavalry, open up your gates to me. You can have my body, but my soul flies free, oh cavalry, my home. They built a highway up overhead. The cement trucks they spin while the motors roll away. Once was a time when the sun shined down, but now we live in dark.